Hello and welcome to From Soil to Seed, Unlocking the Secrets of Nutrient-Dense Gardening. I'm Michael Washburn, the Preservation Director at Seed Savers Exchange, and I'll be your host for this session. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge our community agreements. And so we ask that all participants in growing together, sharing seeds, stories, and skills to be respectful, be curious, be patient, speak from your own experiences, and try to avoid jargon and be conscious of intent versus impact, and take space and make space, and take care of self. And by embracing these community agreements, we embrace a collective responsibility to create spaces that are respectful, inclusive, and empowering for all. And also a special thanks to UNFI, United Natural Foods Incorporated, for sponsoring today's conference. And so we are here today with Julia Dakin. And Julia is a lifetime farmer who has developed a passion for growing nutrient-dense crops after losing her father to cancer and reading that in our lifetimes, 1 out of every 3 people will be diagnosed with this disease. She is the co-founder of Going to Seed, through which she collaborates closely with Joseph Lofthouse, landrace, plant breeder, and teacher. And Julia lives in Mendocino County in Northern California, where she applies and shares her knowledge to foster healthier, sustainable food systems through the power of seed diversity and nutrient-rich crops. Now today, Julia will be talking about genetics, microbes, and plant stress that can greatly impact the nutrient density and flavor of your garden produce. This session offers a deep dive into how gardeners can leverage genetic diversity and soil microbe interactions to cultivate crops that are not only healthier and tastier, but also more resilient. Attendees will gain both the knowledge and the inspiration to apply these concepts in their gardens, ultimately contributing to a healthier, more sustainable approach to food and cultivation. Julia, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Michael. And thanks everybody for coming. Hear about this important topic. I'm really excited to talk to you today, and thanks to Seed Savers Exchange for hosting this fantastic conference. So let's start with clarifying, first of all, what we're going to talk about. So it's micronutrients, right? The antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. It's a complex topic, phytonutrients, allele chemicals, other names for these things. And we're not going to talk about the macronutrients, right? The fats, carbohydrates, and protein. We're talking about the nutrient density per calorie. So let's start by something that we can all agree on, maybe. Fertile soil grows more nutrient-dense food, right? Pretty non-controversial. And the modern decline in vegetable nutrient density is a result of poor farming practices and nutrient-depleted soil. That sounds a lot like it's the farmer's fault, right? And this is everywhere. This is the Scientific American. You guys have probably seen this dozens of places. It's so commonly said and heard that we think of it as intuitive. Because of soil depletion, crops grown decades ago were much richer in vitamins and minerals than the varieties most of us get today. So this part is really non-controversial. Nutrient density decline in vegetables has been significant since 1950. Here's an example of spinach where vitamin C has gone down almost 60%. This is across many species, varieties. Overall, this is not contested. And the reason that we should care, one of the reasons is cancer prevention, right? These antioxidants are what keep us healthy. Beyond cancer, it's all the chronic diseases and our overall health. And so this became personal to me in 2010. My dad died of cancer. And yeah, as like Michael said, those statistics of hearing that, for men specifically, it's 1 in 2 men will die of cancer in our lifetimes, really scary. So I was thinking of my husband and the people I love, and what do I do to prevent that and maybe reverse some of those trends? So I was a farmer, And I decided to focus on this nutrient density and, among other things, soil health. I had a drafter. Her name was Lola. We did organic no-till farming. I really nerded out on soil testing, soil health, remineralizing, all these things that are really important and common in regenerative agriculture, making the best compost tea, biology, and minerals. You guys can probably identify with me on some of those things. And I was rolling along with that until 2020, when I read this report by the Bionutrient Food Association. And their goal was to show that regeneratively farmed produce is higher quality than conventionally farmed produce. Should have been pretty easy. So they did this project where they had hundreds of citizen scientists across multiple countries, multiple continents, and people were sending in samples of produce from their farms, from their grocery stores. And one really cool thing about this project was that they had soil samples attached to those produce samples. So they bring them to their labs, test both, and they released a report and the data. They made all the data open source, which was fantastic. Great project and good report. So I read this report and got to the end. No obvious relationship between soil biological activity and any of the food quality measures. No obvious trends either by antioxidants, polyphenols, or minerals. And at this point, I was like, well, they didn't find it, but give me that data. I will find it, and then I will find those patterns, and then I will let them know what they missed. So I did. I downloaded that data. I learned how to do scatter graphs and pivot tables. And this was 2020, the first COVID winter. It was raining all the time. Everything was canceled. So I had a lot of time and I got really deep into this. I got so deep into this, I wore out our couch and I forgot to eat. My husband had to remind me things because this is really kind of blowing my world apart, where not just nutrient density, but other things that I thought to be true, having spent most of my life in regenerative agriculture, were not borne out in the data. And so at the end of this painful time of analyzing data, I came to similar conclusions that they did. And the first was that mineral levels in the soil don't equal mineral levels in the food samples. So as a bit population size, right? You have a lot of exceptions here. But for example, calcium levels in the tomato fruit had no relationship overall with this population to mineral or calcium levels in the soil sample. And soil biological health markers had no relationship to total nutrient density or phytonutrients. And this was painful for me, having spent years on this, right? This can be painful to see that you've been missing such a giant thing. And I did start finding patterns once I started taking things like color and varieties into consideration. So there were big differences. And you could have red lettuce that was 200 times higher in antioxidants than green lettuce right next to it, same farm. And same with carrots. They had a dozen different species that they were studying. So tomatoes and grapes, there were big differences. And once I learned how to sort by things that took genetics into consideration, I started finding these patterns that were really noticeable. And since then, so 200 times difference, right, in the red lettuce compared to the green lettuce is a giant percentage. That's 20,000%. So since then, it's been a few years now, I've studied more and I've seen compelling research that shows that there can be a relationship between increase in soil quality, for example, using compost over conventional synthetic nitrogen. But it tends to be unreliable. It's not that big, so you could have a difference between 0 and 25%. And it's something that people talk a lot about, but it's like focusing on the 2% instead of the 98%. So I decided at this point, yes, I had been missing something for years, but a lot of other people are too. And so I was going to really focus on that and dig deep. And so I read this book, Eating on the Wild Side, fantastic book for anyone who's interested in this topic. And here you can see a graphic from her book where you have this blue corn. This is 99.5 milligrams of anthocyanins per 100 grams of corn, compared to white at 1.5, right? No wonder our produce has declined so significantly if you consider this transition towards, potentially more white in our grocery stores. And then I wanted to know, so what exactly happened here beyond genetics? And what I discovered was that there is a lot of research around this, and it's breeding, it's plant breeding. So think of the Green Revolution, right? We've been breeding for higher yields. And this is a graph showing mineral content on the y-axis, yields on the x-axis. And as the mineral levels, as the yield increases, the mineral levels decrease. So this is consistent. And the reason for this is that producing those antioxidants and those minerals is metabolically expensive for plants. It's hard, and again, there are plenty of exceptions here, but it's hard for a plant or plant population variety to do both, to be both high quality and high quantity. And this is definitely conventional agriculture, but organic agriculture has suffered something similar because organic agriculture has also been chasing those higher yields to compete with the conventional farmers. And so to summarize this topic, we're going to talk about a few more things, right? We need to focus on genetics, right? Genetics control most of nutrient density, up to 20,000%. So really big deal. And the more color, the more nutrient density. So those pigments are associated with antioxidants, and you can see them and you can taste them. And we need all the colors, right? There's something like 25,000 different antioxidants. We can't focus on just the pinks and the reds. We need all the colors. And here the squash is high in the beta carotene. So we can see them, we can taste them, and they are important for us. But I hear some of you guys saying, like, what about soil? And soil matters. And yes, for sure. And we should not, take our eye off the ball in the soil. But we can think back, we can make an analogy, right? So the micronutrients are like the oil in the car, and the genetics are like the gas, right? Or those micronutrients. Oh, sorry, wrong analogy. But okay, so the car analogy, the micronutrients are like the oil that make everything run well. And the macronutrients, the protein, that is the energy. So those carbohydrates and the protein. And so it's not either or. We need to focus on soil and genetics. So we're going to cover a few more things today. We talked about colorful genetics, but also we're going to go into microbes, plant stress, and diverse ancestry. And I'll give you some resources. There's a lot we're going to cover today, but I'll point you guys towards more resources to learn more about these things. So microbes alter chemical constituents of plants. This was work done by Dr. James White, where he inoculated the same variety of carrot with different microbes or different endophytes. And at the conclusion of the study, the nutrient density, some of those minerals were much different. So this is kind of a complex topic. And I want to tell you guys a story about a corn plant to show you the relationship between the plants and the microbes. So here's some corn, right? This corn is in my field. It is cold. Let's take this plant on the right? It's a little cold, and it needs more nutrients, right? So it needs more calcium, needs more nitrogen, and it's forming specific relationships with the microbes in that soil to to recruit the ones that'll bring it calcium, the ones that'll bring it, more fertility, to protect it. It's developing lots and lots of relationships throughout its life, and that is because it can put different exudates, those sugars from photosynthesis, into its roots to attract the microbes that it needs. So when it finds the ones that it needs, those specific ones, it brings those into her stem, onto her leaves, and then as she's forming those seeds, she puts them onto those seeds. This is a billion year process, right? Nature is sophisticated and smart. And this has been happening for a long time, long before we started saving and selling seeds. So the reason for this is because in the following year, the seedling that has those endophytes is hitting the ground running, right? It already has the relationships with that calcium that it has, kept on its seed, inside the seed. So it can grow more quickly, be healthier, develop more relationships with microbes. And as that relates to nutrient density, the more microbe relationships it has, the more it can put those into the seed, into the fruit, into what we are eating. And to really benefit from this billion-year-old process, we have to save seeds. Right? We can't get seeds from we can't get seeds from far away and expect them to hit the ground running with our particular soil type. So when we're saving seeds, we are also saving that microbiome. So number 3 that we're going to talk about is plant stress. And plant stress increases nutrient density because when plants face mild stress, they increase production of antioxidants. And often they produce those antioxidants when faced with stress that are the same ones that we benefit from. So for example, tomatoes, there was a study with 2 groups of men, and one group was eating tomato paste every day. And at the end of 6 weeks, they were exposed, both the control group and the tomato paste men were exposed to UV rays, to sun. And the tomato paste men were 40% more protected from the UV rays. They were less likely to get sunburned, which is really cool, right? That we share those antioxidants. So another example is this broccoli. So when broccoli is exposed to stress, to cold stress in this case, it produces more glucosinolates. And those are the same glucosinolates that protect us against oxidative stress, so heat and cold. And then when we eat those, we're more protected. So this is a great example, a great argument for eating more of like hyper-local food from your garden, right? That's exposed to those similar environmental stresses that you are. So some of these most common stressors that we can keep in mind: hot and cold stress. So that remake cover is not really helping produce extra high quality food. And UV rays. I found this photo yesterday on Facebook where it was too hot, and I know it's far too hot most of the country right now, but they're covering up their tomatoes with shade cloth. Now, that doesn't really help tomatoes produce that lycopene, as we saw. And then pests and bugs and the slugs, the plants can respond to those really specifically with antioxidants that make their leaves not palatable for the bugs, and yet those are good for us, and oftentimes. So then there's drought stress, and we know this with dry farm tomatoes. They taste better and they're better for us. And it's not just because they have less water in their fruit. It's also because they're stimulated. plant is stimulated to grow, to produce more of those antioxidants that then taste better and are better for us. And then there's the mechanical stress or herbivory that in nature, it's deer, gardens, maybe us. We can use that to our advantage to sort of stimulate production of more of these phytonutrients and antioxidants. So you might be wondering when, well, you don't want to kill your plants, right? You want to do, if you're going to apply any stress, you want to do it at the right time. And the seedling stage is already stressful enough for our seedlings, right? We don't need to apply more stress at that time. But natural stress, let it happen. You know, these corn plants are a little cold, and that's okay. I still want them to grow. They're still going to do fine. And then it's later on when I might turn off the water to the squash after that, especially in the second half of that fruit formation. That is when that plant will be feeling the stress of the lack of water or other things, and then putting more of it into the squash. So that sounds easy, right? But it's not always that simple. We know that sometimes plants just die, and some plants respond to stress. And so I think it's useful to understand one factor and why that can happen. And that's our last point, diverse ancestry. So this is a bit of a complex topic here. I want to make an analogy for you. So you have Mr. Handyman diverse. He inherits tools from his parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. They were all in different construction trades. So one might have been a carpenter, one was an electrician, a plumber, and he has a lot of different tools, right? Very diverse tool set. And then you have Handyman specialized, who inherits tools from his parents and great-grandparents. And they're all carpenters. So he has a lot of hammers or saws or screwdrivers. And he may be excellent at certain things, but doesn't have the diversity of skills and tools that the previous handyman has. So then let's say that you have a house and your house gets blight. So you can call in Mr. Handyman Diverse that has all the different tools and is able to respond effectively to the drywall needs some fixing, and he has plumbing tools and all those different things that he'll need to fix this problem. And then you consider calling Handyman Specialized, but don't, because in a lot of cases, he won't be able to respond as effectively to the various stressors. And, our houses or our plants can experience hundreds of different ways that, they get infected or attacked or experience those environmental stresses. So having a diverse set of tools is really crucial. And so back to the plants, this is Mr. Plant Diverse that has inherited from many great-grandparents a diversity of tools. So in this case, we're talking about antioxidants, phytonutrients, and microbes. There are a lot of other tools that plants have. There's a great podcast I have in a reference guide that you guys are going to get that explains all the different ways that plants can really effectively and intelligently respond to different stressors. So this is a very diverse toolbox that a plant can call on to respond effectively and specifically to the different things that may happen. And in the case of microbes, the more diversity, it's really interesting that actually that corresponds to a diversity in potential relationships with microbes. So then you have Mr. Plant Specialized, and this plant can respond effectively to certain situations, but doesn't have that diverse toolbox. And the same with the microbes. So this is genes and alleles, and they correspond to specific things and specific microbes. So this was a really interesting component to this nutrient density. And topic, and the reason that, specifically this applies is because we want our plants that are stressed, that are developing microbes, to have the fullest toolbox that they can have, especially when we're bringing in seeds from elsewhere. We want them to adapt to our challenges and our garden, and this is one thing to keep in mind. So in a real life example, here you have the Mr. Diverse on the left. These are both zucchini plants planted on the same day, same soil, and same everything. So the one on the right, there's actually two little ones on the right, so they can't respond to these particular pest attacks. For what happened with this plant on the left, it got bitten by a bug, and the bug said, "Oh, wait a second, this plant is producing, this is no longer delicious to me. I will just stick with the one that, I can, doesn't have the effective response to this particular pest." So I hope this makes sense. In or other cases, this plant on the right might do perfectly well, but in general, it won't be able to respond to as many different stressors, and that means that it won't be able to put those different antioxidants and phytonutrients into the squash, into the zucchini in this case, that it's producing, whereas the one on the left is really able to also not just in its leaves, but it's putting more of those antioxidants into its fruit. So here are those. Well, here are some squash examples where on the left you have this diverse population. Each one has more tools. Each squash plant is more diverse, and then it's in a population that's more diverse. And that means that it's producing more of a diversity of those antioxidants, putting them into its fruit. And then this butternut on the left is more limited. So this butternut plant was healthy. Maybe it was protected by its human farmer a little bit more. And it's not able to produce such a diversity of those nutrients. And you can often taste it in the flavor. One might be sweeter, but it doesn't necessarily have the full complement of those different phytonutrients. So that was a lot. And so I'll summarize it for you guys. So there's 4 different things that we talked about. And the primary and most important thing that you can do starting now is choosing those colorful varieties. And Seed Savers Exchange has all these fantastic, beautiful varieties. And also, you need a diversity. So don't just choose the dark purples, but we want the greens and the reds and the purples, yellows, and then save seeds. And remember that when you're saving your seeds from healthy plants, you're also saving the microbiome associated with those seeds. And over time, that can really give your plants more of an ability to thrive wherever you are. And then for these other projects, which were embracing diversity and increasing plant stress, I don't want to say that you should do all of these at once for all the things in your garden, right? Choose one, something that you're interested in studying more about, and then embrace diversity around that. So in the Lane mentioned those landraces and grexes, so that's kind of what I'm talking about here. And you can buy a seed packet that has more diversity. They're starting to be more common now, and then keep it diverse. In a lot of cases, the ultimate goal for a breeder or a seed saver is to maintain that purity, to go from this diversity that you might see here to just that red, just that one color. But when you're doing that, you're losing the diverse plant toolbox, and it's just something that we need to keep in mind. So then allowing plant stress and doing a little bit more of that in all our gardens is fine, but to really get the benefit of that, you need to first and also embrace the diversity. And then with plant stress, to get the full benefit of it, selection over time for ones that are more capable of dealing with stress, and also saving your seeds from the healthy plants. This will all bring you not just more nutrient density, but healthier gardens and also less stress for you. When you're like, well, my plant's so stressed, it's okay. This is part of nature. It's sort of, I have felt takes a weight off your shoulders. You can be more joyful in your garden. This is nature. These are the bugs having their influence, and that's okay. So these are all tools that you guys can use in your gardens in future years. And yes, I hope you have good luck. And I'd love to hear more from you guys on what you actually choose to do. So I am coming here today from Going to Seed is a nonprofit, and our mission statement is shifting agriculture towards adaptation, community, and diversity. And of course, as you can see, nutrient density and flavor. And if you're wondering, if this is somewhat interesting, you can learn more. We have 3 courses, one taught by Joseph Lofthouse and guests, and another talk by Dr. James White, really digging deep into that microbial component, and then a course taught by a few farmers in southern Mexico. And you can find all that at goingtoseed.org. There's also an online community where you can ask questions, see what other people are doing, and post photos and see other people's photos. So I welcome you to go there. And there's also a page on references for this particular topic, the things that I've mentioned here today. So I want to say a big thank you to these people, Anna and Joseph and my husband Rich, because they have really given me the opportunity to dig deep, learn more, and have listened to this presentation multiple times. So I appreciate them and all the other people and you guys for joining me on this journey. So thanks everybody, and love to answer some questions and hear more about what you guys are doing.
Well, Julia, that was fantastic and beautiful all at the same time. It really reminded me of a fellow I know that kind of grew up around corn. So he's kind of a corn expert. Does a lot of hand pollinating, working on different varieties and things like that. I remembered one time he told me, we were talking about efforts to get certain corn back into indigenous communities where it originally came from, and he said it's hard to move corn. Corn can have a hard time moving, but when it goes back home, it remembers that is home. And it may take a little bit of time because it's been selected in other places, but that remembrance is held up in the genetics of that corn. And so it will remember, and it will find its way, back to doing well in that region. So I thought that was really interesting when you were talking about how, there's so much more tied into the genetics of a variety and that relationship that it has. So
Yeah, there really is. And the last few years have just taught me so much on the plant intelligence, awareness, sophistication, amazing things that are going on that we're just barely scratching the surface. So yeah, memory, epigenetics, all those other things that, we can't cover in half an hour that are also really important.
yeah, so I had Spencer asking us, can you give us a definition or example of Grex, and because it's a new term, and maybe your work with Joseph, and things like that. Maybe you can kind of add to what Joseph Lofthouse is kind of adding to that, and like you're saying, you are starting to see these Grex mixes or Grex beats, maybe by I think um, uh, uh, was it Adaptive Seed Company has that and whatnot. So maybe you could speak for Spencer a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually added it to the slide after Lane Selman's talk because she mentioned the landraces and grexes. And what it is a very diverse population. It may be a few varieties mixed together, and that isn't stabilized at all. And maybe the intention is to stabilize it into a landrace or a variety, but at this point, it's a mix of different varieties, and you can see that diversity. So it can vary. You can be conservative with the grex with a mix of a couple of different zucchinis, or you can be really crazy and make really wide crosses and see a lot of fantastic evolution, adaptation, and the colors and the flavors.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite examples is kind of the work that the Heirloom Collard Project did. In the Heirloom, they have an ultra cross where Ira Wallace and I know Chris Smith, the Utopian Seed Project, they've been taking many collards and crossing them up. And now you can actually go on Ujamaa Farming Cooperative Alliance and buy the ultra cross of collards. And so you get a really diverse population, and then you can kind of select out of that. And
Yeah, and one last thing for an example and access to more grexes, we have a program at Going to Seed. It's our seed share program. And so if you go to goingtoseed.org and then click on seeds and 2024 collection, you'll see a description of what those seed mixes are. And the idea is that they're all selected from healthy plants, diverse plants that are most nutritious, early, flavorful, but they're very diverse. So that's a great example and a very cool program where we're collecting seeds from seed savers all over the US and Canada.
that's awesome. Yeah, so Angela Wolverton was saying that she's saving her peas this year. She's got a sandy oak, jack pine forest, so lots of acid and a lot of drainage. But she does let them get a bit stressed and plays the survival of the fittest. And I think you were really able to touch a bit on that and kind of that importance of saving your own seeds.
Yeah,
So
great project. Yeah, that's an example of a challenging situation. You don't have to add additional stress. You're just finding the ones that thrive in that situation.
yeah. Well, we did get we got a lot of enthusiasm. Eduardo just said it was fantastic and just loved it. A lot of thank you for sharing your knowledge with everybody here. I know we had some folks that in the beginning were asking, saying, "Well, I grew a garden with a little bit of diversity, but maybe I need to be adding more to it, so I'm getting that full nutrient spectrum that maybe my body needs." And Brenna Burke at the end here was saying that yeah, she's going to look at her garden a lot different, and it does. It really, sitting in on this, you really start to look at your garden different, and it really makes you think of it. So I really thank you for the impact that's going to have on folks' gardens as they go back out to them after this talk and kind of look at them.
Yeah,
So
good. And there's been a lot of focus, permaculture and sustainable farming on biodiversity, and not genetic diversity within a species. So that's why I wanted to focus on that as something people don't often think about. But yeah, there's a difference. You can have biodiversity where you have a lot of different species, different varieties, and that's really important too. And then just keep in mind that component of diversity within a single plant and a single population.
yeah, Anna just said I'm located in northeast New Mexico, and people constantly say you can't grow corn without irrigation here, determined to show otherwise at the market, right?
That's wonderful. Thank you, Anna Marie, and love to see your photos and hear more as it evolves.
Well, I think we'll break for lunch. And Julia, like I said, this was fascinating. I wish I could share all the chat comments here, but we're gonna have to let folks go to lunch. But yeah, just all over the place. It seems like you inspired a lot of people today. I know I learned some stuff, and your talk and your research backed up. You know, because the way you started it out, like, here's some research with no evidence, this doesn't show anything. And it takes our community of scientists to say, well, it's other than that, and go out and have our community scientists go out and challenge some of these reports. And it's wonderful that you were able to come up with some really definitive stuff that, you know, kind of, you know, I hear so much through time from different farmers and things like that. And this work kind of backs up a lot of things that, you know, folks have told me and taught me through time. So it's really nice to have that in my back pocket to be like, hey, go check out this research. So,
well, thank you so much for having me. That was really fun, and preparing for it, you know, gave me new insights. So it was all around great presentation to work on.
well, good deal. Well, good deal. Again, Julia, thank you so much. I'd like special thanks to this great interactive audience we had here today. Appreciate all the comments and questions. And a special thanks to UNFI for sponsoring today. So up next is Early Pillars of Seed Savers Exchange with our good friend Glenn Drowns. That's going to be starting just after lunch at 1 p.m. Central or 2 p.m. Eastern, and our folks on the West Coast, that'll be 11 a.m. Again, Julia, thank you so much, and we will see y'all back here shortly. All right, take care.
Bye. Thank you.